I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Mark Yarchoan. Mark is an assistant professor of oncology at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. He's been working on a very exciting and interesting new clinical trial in immunotherapy for fibromyalgia carcinoma. Mark's got expertise in GI cancers, particularly liver cancers, and one of the classes of cancer that he's working on a lot is fibromyalgia carcinoma. Dr. Yarchoan,
Thank you for having me today.
great to have you. We're going to be talking a lot today about therapeutic cancer vaccines, and particularly one that you and your colleagues at Johns Hopkins have developed for fibromyalgia carcinoma. Maybe you could start by telling us what is meant by a therapeutic cancer vaccine. How do they work?
Thanks for that question. I think many of us are familiar with preventative vaccines, things like measles, mumps, and rubella, and COVID, that we prevent infection by giving a vaccine first. And actually, many people have had cancer vaccines already. For example, vaccines against human papillomavirus, which prevents cervical cancer and other cancers. But therapeutic vaccines are a bit different because therapeutic vaccines are designed not to prevent cancer, but to actually treat cancer. And so our goal with a therapeutic vaccine is to direct the immune system to recognize cancer as foreign and to attack cancer. And that's what we're trying to do here.
In the case of fibromyalgia carcinoma, is there some particular way that you're hoping to get the immune system to recognize the cancer as foreign?
Yeah, so all cancer comes out of a normal cell. And so that's one of the challenges of developing immunotherapy for cancer, is that cancer is actually quite similar to us. And so when we think about targeting the immune system against cancer, what we're really trying to do is find out what aspect of a cancer can be seen as foreign by our immune system, and taking advantage of that to develop vaccines or other immunotherapies. Yeah, a number of years ago, Sandy Simon at Rockefeller found that patients with fibromyalgia cancers have the same genetic event in their tumors. And this is a fusion between DNA JB1 and PRKACA. And virtually all fibromyalgia tumors have the same signature genomic event. And this abnormal gene codes for an abnormal protein that can actually be presented on the cell surface of fibromyalgia tumors. And so when we develop a vaccine, our vaccine actually targets this abnormal protein that is very specific to fibromyalgia tumors.
When you and others have been involved in studies in the past trying to define what cancers are most susceptible to immune therapy, especially immune therapies with the immune checkpoint inhibitors, fibromyalgia cancer, most people would have not expected to be a good candidate for immune therapy. How are you trying to change that with this particular vaccine?
I mean, we think that part of the reason that fibromyalgia cancer may be less responsive to immunotherapy than some other tumor types is that fibromyalgia cancers tend to have a very low tumor mutation burden, similar to other pediatric cancers. They don't have many mutations. And mutations code for abnormal proteins, which is what our body uses to figure out what to attack. And so what we think is that for these sort of low tumor mutation burden tumors like fibromyalgia cancer, it's probably going to take more than one drug to really get to the point of an immune response. And in the case of our study, we think that a vaccine may be an important component because we can take advantage of the fact that even though we don't have many mutations, we have at least one very good one, which is this DNA JB1 PRKACA fusion event. And if we can stimulate the immune system specifically against this abnormal protein, we may be able to make up for the fact that there are fewer mutations than other tumors. At least that's our hope.
Is it important to the strategy that the abnormal protein you're targeting is also thought to be very important in either the creation or maybe the constant maintenance of fibrolamellar as a cancer, so-called cancer driver. And is that a new strategy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. There have been many attempts to target different proteins on different cancers. And one of the things that is fairly clear is that these so-called driver mutations may be particularly good targets for the immune system. And the reason for that is that the cancer is addicted to this particular protein. It needs it to grow. And so it can't simply get rid of the protein. Sometimes when we target a protein that the body doesn't need, one of the ways that it can hide from the immune system is to simply get rid of the protein. But that is unlikely to happen here because this abnormal fusion seems to be so important for the cancer itself that it can't simply get rid of it. The other reason that this is important is that we really think that this abnormal fusion protein is in every single fibrolamellar cancer cell. And so it's a so-called clonal mutation, something that is everywhere in the cancer. And so therefore, if the immune system sees it, it should be able to attack the cancer no matter where the cancer is, whether it's in the liver or in the lungs. As long as it has this protein, it should be seen by the immune system and attacked.
Talk about targeting that protein with a vaccine. Chemically, how do you achieve that?
Proteins inside of all of the cells in our body are chopped up into little pieces and presented on the cell surface in the context of something called HLA or MHC. And all the time, our immune system is looking for little pieces of abnormal protein on the cell surface. And so what we have done is we've taken the piece of the signature fibrolamellar protein, and we've turned that little piece of protein into a vaccine, combining it with something that is almost like a danger signal that tells our body that this piece of protein is a problem.
In the clinical trial that you're carrying out in fibrolamellar patients, the peptide vaccine you've just described is being given together with two more drugs. Could you explain what those are and the rationale for using them?
Great question. We are giving our vaccine with two other drugs, as you said. One is called nivolumab. The brand name of this is Opdivo. And the other is ipilimumab, and the brand name of this is Yervoy. And these are two drugs called immune checkpoint inhibitors that are actually used for many, many different kinds of cancer and actually have been used in fibrolamellar cancers with moderate success on their own. What we find is when we give a vaccine by itself, vaccines are good at telling the immune system that there's a problem and directing the immune system. But when we give a vaccine by itself, what we find is that the immune system can tire out and develop what we call exhaustion. And the idea of giving the vaccine with nivolumab and ipilimumab is that these two other drugs actually rev up the immune system, boost the immune system, and in particular, they can prevent what we call exhaustion, T-cell exhaustion, so that the immune system, when it gets activated and primed by the vaccine, can continue to attack the cancer without pooping out. And that's really the goal here.
So the idea of combining kind of that specific immune activator going after something in the cancer plus these two checkpoint inhibitors is one that might be really interesting to test in patients. But before you went into patients, did you have any specific reason to think that it would work?
Yeah, we did. We actually designed some preclinical experiments in mice, trying to see if the vaccine would work better with these two drugs. And what we found was that there really seemed to be some additive or even synergistic activity where the vaccine by itself was not that effective, but when we added it to these two drugs, we really saw a lot of effect against the tumor. I'll say that also these kinds of cancer vaccines targeting abnormal proteins are being studied for many different tumors, not just fibrolamellar cancer. And in other tumors, there's also been an effort to develop vaccines in combination with these sorts of immune checkpoint inhibitor drugs based on a lot of data and a lot of different models.
So this is what I guess people call a first in human study, or phase 1 or phase 1/2 type of clinical trial. Are there special considerations when you're putting something to human beings for the first time?
Absolutely. It's amazing that patients are risking their life to try to develop new knowledge for other patients with fibromyalgia cancer. And I think really our patients are amazingly brave to go on first in man studies like this because we really don't know if this combination will work, and we also don't know how safe it is. That's why we need to do these studies. When we do these sorts of trials, we do a lot of safety monitoring to make sure that the immune system does not get overactive and doesn't attack some other part of the body. And we follow patients quite closely. It was also very important when we started the study that we didn't start a bunch of patients at once. So one of our patients was very brave and actually volunteered to go first. And that's an amazingly brave thing to do. And hopefully we're going to learn a lot about this treatment that, if it's successful, could be used for many patients.
It's clear from what you're saying that studying the safety of this approach is kind of the first goal of the study. What other specific goals do you have?
Like everybody else who conducts a study, we always hope that we're helping our patients, right? We want to see the tumor shrink. But for a first in man study, really the first goal, as you said, is to show that the treatment is tolerated and that it's safe. And in the case of this particular study, we also are very interested to see what immune changes happen with the vaccine and what immune changes happen when the vaccine is added to these checkpoint inhibitor drugs. So in particular, we're looking in the blood and also in the cancer to see if the immune system locks into this abnormal protein and whether it actually attacks the tumor.
In this study, how many patients are you going to be hoping to enroll and look at the safety and the possible benefits of this vaccine?
So in the original design of our study, we aim to treat a total of 12 patients, which we think is enough to have a sense of whether we're seeing the kind of activity that justifies pushing this treatment forward.
In many first in human studies, the regulatory body, the Food and Drug Agency, is pretty restrictive about only allowing the treatment to be given to adult patients. But I understand that this trial is actually going to allow you to enroll some younger patients as well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is a really big challenge for regulatory bodies, is that they want to make sure that kids have access to new treatments, but they also don't want to put kids at extra risk. When we went to the Food and Drug Administration, we really said that we thought it was important to include kids because, number one, we thought that maybe this is a treatment that could really help patients, and we didn't want to exclude kids who might benefit from it. But also, we thought that it was important to make sure that this treatment was safe in kids because we didn't want to finish the study and not have that answer. And after some back and forth with the Food and Drug Administration, along with some advocacy from patients and from the foundation in this community, the FDA agreed to allow us to put children on this study as long as the first patients were all adults. And so that's the way that we've moved forward with this.
Dr. Yarchoan, so you explained that the trial is open to patients who are in the young adult and also in the adolescent group, 12 years old and up. Are there other criteria that a patient has to meet to be eligible to enroll in this first in human study?
One of the most important criteria is that patients actually need to have this abnormal protein that we're targeting, because we wouldn't want to give a vaccine against something that's not there. And so we require patients to have testing to make sure that they really do have fibromyalgia cancer and that they have this abnormal protein that should be there. It's in virtually all fibromyalgia tumors, although I'll tell you that we've had patients who come to us with a diagnosis of fibromyalgia cancer, and when we really look, this protein is missing, and when we look at their pathology, we find that they really have a different tumor type. We actually encourage all of our patients to get this testing to confirm that the DNA JB1 PRKACA fusion is there, because we think it's really important to confirm the diagnosis. Beyond that, patients need to be in reasonable shape. So they need to be up and out of bed and functional, because we need patients to be strong enough to tolerate this kind of treatment. I think another important criteria is that patients need to be able to come here for treatment. This is not a treatment that we can just ship by UPS to any cancer center. It really needs to be given here under our supervision. And we recognize that patients live all over the country, and this is a major commitment coming here to get this kind of treatment. The only other criteria that I think is worth mentioning is patients need to have adequate organ function to tolerate this kind of treatment. So their liver needs to work, their kidneys need to work, and they could not have received an immune checkpoint inhibitor in the past. And you might say, why is that? Well, we really think that this treatment is much more likely to work if patients have not had a checkpoint inhibitor in the past. And we think that the risks and benefits favor doing this trial only if they haven't received that kind of treatment before.
Besides that criterion of not having had an immune checkpoint inhibitor previously, are there any other prior therapies that are or are not indicated the patient is going to enroll in your trial?
Actually, no, we allow any number of prior therapies as long as patients have not received an immune checkpoint inhibitor therapy. So treatments like 5-FU interferon, cytotoxic chemotherapy like GemOx, et cetera, are perfectly acceptable.
So that really means that pretty significant percentage of fibromyalgia cancer patients could be enrolled and come to Johns Hopkins to participate in this study.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. How can patients who may be interested learn more about whether they're eligible or not and whether they'd potentially like to participate?
So we certainly are happy to see patients with fibromyalgia cancer. In the era of COVID, actually, oftentimes we can do video visits so patients can speak to us and not have to come here physically, just to learn about this trial and learn about other treatments for fibromyalgia cancer.
Thanks so much for telling us about this peptide vaccine as a possible way to treat this disease.
Thank you for your time. And again, I think the Fibromyalgia Cancer Foundation has been an amazing resource for patients. And I'll note that the foundation has really supported our research and supported this trial. So thank you for not only your scientific input, but also your support of patients and for our work. Thank you.